men down, bullies, blow the men down.
To me waiting, blow the men down.
Blow the men down, bullies.
Well, it's Sunday, September 26th, and we had a lot of rain this morning, and the sun is just starting to peek through, and it's a little after 3 p.m. And now as we progress into the fall, heading towards winter, cold weather's coming on fast, and of course this far north the days are just getting a whole lot shorter. We don't have as much daylight. And I haven't been able to get much work done on my 18-foot sailboat build this past week, a couple of weeks really, simply because with all those hurricane and with all the remains of those hurricanes and tropical storms that came up the coast, combined with some heavy thunderstorms just unique to our own region, it's just been nothing but rain and high winds. So when you're working on something outside, it's hard to accomplish anything. So a lot of time has gone by where I've been working inside and doing other odd jobs. But well, it's been a while since I've been out here, and let me show you what I have been working on. Fortunately, this temporary rain shelter has been pretty good at keeping the boat from filling up with water, so I haven't had to worry too much about that. But these cheap plastic tops don't last very long and they start breaking down. Of course, I'll have to take it down for the winter because it won't handle a snow load. The last video I did, I think it was finishing up this breast hook. And of course everything is cured, so it's in there pretty solid. I put in this shouldered eye bolt down here in the Sampson post, and that's to tie on the end of the anchor rod. Well, you can't see it too well there, but you can see the nut on the end of a bolt there. That was for the eye bolt that I put in. But you'll also notice this. You see this stick going down to this pad down here? Let's see if I can get a closer look at it. There's that pad, and that stick is kind of holding that pad down in place because the pad is not fastened. It's not glued or screwed. That is simply a plug because I have to add some weight up forward. According to my calculations, I'm going to be adding some more weight, and I'll be pouring a little bit of concrete up here in the bow. It won't be very much, but enough to where that wooden plug that I put in is going to act as kind of like a mold or plug. When the concrete, after it's been poured and it sets up, I can pull that out. That will basically form a rose box because I'm going to put a bilge pump in here, just a single bilge pump just for this watertight space, the forward anchor locker, if you want to call it that. So once the concrete is in and it cures and I pull out that plug, I can mount the bilge pump. I already made a bracket to hold the bilge pump so that I can easily remove it from the access port inside the boat. Up here on deck, this would be decked over, there's also a watertight hatch that can mount on top here on the port side, so I can easily reach down and access the pump from that way as well. And then of course the plumbing for the pump, there'll be a through hull somewhere up here well above the water line, and I already have the through hull fitting and the hose and the clamps and all that sort of thing. So you might be wondering what's going on here. You see these different shapes here, and the reason for that is I'm getting ready to put a little bit of concrete ballast in the anchor locker, but I really can't reach down that far. There's so much freeboard there and it's a tight space. So I made these tools out of scrap wood. And what I'm doing now, I've already sealed them with some spray lacquer. And now I'm going to take some Canova wax and rub it in so that the concrete doesn't stick to it. And these are the tools I'm using to move the concrete around and tamp it down and get it into position and smooth it, because a regular trowel is just too big and I just can't reach down there with it. So I'll use these in its place. So now it's just a matter of taking some of this Canaba wax and putting a coat on these tools, going over the lacquer, and it'll just make an easier time of it when I'm putting the concrete in and getting it all smoothed down and tamped into place. As you can see, I was able to get the concrete ballast in, and I really couldn't film it because I didn't have a good place to mount the camera where it wouldn't be in the way, but it's not a big deal. It's just mixing some ready mixed concrete out of a bag and putting it in place, a little bit of reinforcing mesh, and tamping it all down. And I also tried to slope it and angle it so it goes down. That plug will come out and that'll be a rose box, and that's where the bilge pump is going. So hope this works out. I put in slightly less ballast than I calculated. I figured that, along with the weight of the anchor and the anchor chain, I might have to add a little bit more, or it might be just right. But I'll wait till I get the boat in the water and we'll tell for sure then. There's my rose box. Just have to clean it up a little bit, and then I can install my bilge pump. What I also have to do is I have to vacuum up all the loose stuff, little bits and pieces of concrete, before I can do that. And this mold worked out pretty good. Now that I have the anchor locker all prepped, ready to go, I'm going to be able to install my bilge pump. And this is an old Rule 450 GPH bilge pump that I had in inventory from my old wooden boat shop on Cape Cod. I moved from there here to Maine about 17 and a half years ago, maybe a little more than that. This was just leftover inventory, but it's brand new. It was never used. But just to make sure that it worked okay, I submerged this in a bucket of water. I hooked up these wires to a 12-volt power source, DC power source, and it pumped water. It worked just fine. There were no problems with it. Wasn't seized up or anything. So then I took this piece of aluminum flat bar, put a bend in it, and drilled and tapped some holes to mount the bilge pump on, because well, it's a long way down. You really can't get down there to work easily. So this bar I can mount against the bulkhead, and that puts the bilge pump right in place into the rose box, so it gets a good suction. I've got a couple of stainless steel hose clamps. I've got my through hull fitting, and I've got plenty of hose here of the proper size. So now I just have to mount it into place. I have to drill a hole for the through hull. I have to make a backing plate, because the hull is only the hull sides are only a ½ an inch thick, so plus a little bit more with the fiberglass. I want to add another piece of ½ inch plywood, bore a 1 inch hole in it, and I'll use that as a backup to the hull panel. What I'm doing right now is I'm taking a small acid brush, and I have some epoxy which does not have any fillers in it. It's just thin epoxy. It's already a thin viscosity epoxy. I'm using a Racka brand. As I'm coating the plywood, the bare plywood where I just bored this hole, and I want this epoxy to soak in, and that'll solidify and give me a good solid coating so that water, if any moisture or water gets in there, it's not going to start rotting the plywood. When I'm finished with this thin coating, I'm going to add some thickeners. By the time I return with the epoxy all thickened, this application that I'm doing now will have soaked in, and any little little hollows and things and so forth that you get will be filled in with the thickened epoxy, and it'll have a very good solid coating. Okay, in addition to coating the inside of the hole with this unthickened epoxy, the thin epoxy, I'm also going to coat this bare plywood backer block, and I want the epoxy to soak into that as well for a little bit more protection. Well, it just started to rain. It's been overcast all day. It's cold out. I can't really do any epoxy work, but I can put in this through hull. I want to make sure I have a good seal. I put on way more than I need. Get a little bit more goop here. This rain's giving me a lot of background noise. Sorry about that. Not much I can do about it. I don't have any kind of filter or special audio equipment that can take that out. That's good. Finger around there. And I just have to clean up the excess on the outside. So now I just have to determine the hose length and cut it to size. I can always cut it a little bit more if I have to. Now you can get through hull fittings that have a 90-degree elbow on the inside. I don't happen to have one. This is a straight one. So this hose is sticking out a lot more than it should, but I can get a little more of a bend in the hose, and to keep it in that bend, if I get myself a heat gun, which I do have one, and I get this all warmed up, put a bend in it, and restrain it, it'll keep that bend. So for all intents and purposes, I have this bilge pump hooked up. Now when the deck goes over here, I'm going to have a 10-inch round watertight hatch so I can easily reach and access this hose. I can access the pump. I can also access things from down here, from the other hatch. Now the wire I'm going to run up along here, and I'll have a watertight grommet that will go through this collision bulkhead. I do have one somewhere. I have to locate it, but I will put the wire, and there'll be some wire clips so it holds it up holds the wire against the bulkhead, so it's nice and neat and orderly and not sticking out. This hose is going to have a couple of retainers over here, so it's up against this port side panel, so it's not in the way. The anchor chain and rod comes down over here on the starboard side. This port side is reserved for this space here, machinery. There'll be a couple of hangers where I could reach down and hang some line in here if I want. So that's what that amounts to. So there's more to do here. I do have to put in all the hangers, and I gotta make everything nice, neat, and orderly. But aside from that, the bilge pump is now in place. It's mounted, and I can call that good. And I didn't have to try to stand on my head to get it down there and put it in place. That's a good thing. I also have to put a little primer, some paint around here. This concludes this week's video, I think. This is about as far as I'm going to take it. And the major stuff is done. Everything else is just small beams. I hope you give me a thumbs up, and give me a comment in the comment section, and share the video, and thank you very much for watching. I very much appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe. There's the pump. See how the hose comes up here and how it has to be held. Some kind of bracket or something. A little bit more of a bend here, but at least it's attached to the through-hull fitting. So the pump's lowered down into the rose box. We're good to go.